So I'm going to talk about the history of computer programming. So the history dates back to the 19th century, and a lot has happened in the last 150 years to computer programming. And I'm going to discuss about how it all started and how is programming like, many years back. Things have changed, quite drastically. Programming has now become much easier compared to what it used to be in the past. So let's learn a bit about the history of computer programming. It dates back to the 19th century, and the first computer programs were, basically to compute arithmetic operations, right? They were not very powerful. They were more like calculators, adding numbers, subtracting numbers, finding factorials of numbers, doing basic arithmetic computation. That was what computers were doing, when computers were developed first time. But later on, things changed, and I think one mathematician who contributed immensely to the improvement of computational power was Alan Turing, a British mathematician, highly acclaimed mathematician of his time. Who developed different concept of having a universal machine that could simulate any computer algorithm, right? And one other mathematician also really helped, which was John von Neumann. So he was one of the greatest mathematician of last century, and he contributed to many fields, and certainly to computer science, one of the finest computer science ever had. We have ever had. He was also a great mathematician and a physicist, and he has contributed to economics. He was a polymath, von Neumann. So these two scientists really made the foundation of modern computer languages, modern computing also in general. But there is an interesting story before these two gentlemen contributed immensely to computer programming. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that also. But the first programming languages were primarily the machine languages. The codes used to translate the instructions, and these electronic systems, computers are electronic system, would understand them directly through these different codes. There used to be punch cards later on, and Photon was the first high-level language. The machine language is a direct low-level language which interacts with the machine directly, whereas high-level language, where you do not directly interact with the hardware, the electronics, integrated circuits, and those things within the computer, and you provide the instruction on the screen, and then it is interpreted in machine language later on. And that happened when Photon was created. Also COBOL by IBM. I think Photon was also by IBM, not sure. I think both were developed by IBM. Right. So Photon was the first high-level language. So here is some sample Photon code. It used to be a very popular programming language, by the way, in the 60s, 70s. I think up until 90s also. Some people are still using Photon, I think. Especially the scientific people, people working in scientific research, they're still using, some of them still using Photon. So to my generation or the next generation, younger generation, this probably won't sound very familiar, but Photon used to be a very popular language. Here is this code, how to add two numbers. Implicit none, that means you have to explicitly mention what the values of A and B are, and then C equal to A plus B. This is just to add two numbers, you have to write like 6-7 lines of code. In Python, you just write one line of code and it gets done, right? So that's an interesting thing about the modern languages, right? Python and Julia, these languages, whereas it used to be a bit more complex back then. But before Photon, actually, right, there were also another set of language called assembly language. We'll also talk about that. That came between the machine language and the high-level language like Photon. And the first ever programmer was a British mathematician, a woman, actually. Very important to know this. A lot of time you'll find that women are not very well represented in the tech industry, but you'll be surprised to know that the first ever programmer was a woman. She was British in 19th century. Her name is Adele Loveless. He wrote the first computer program ever. She was working with Charles Babbage. I think she was using analytical engine, which Charles Babbage, along with his team, created. And using that, she wrote the first program. I think she wrote the first program was on algorithm to find out Bernoulli's number. And in recognition of that, I think second of Tuesday of every October is now celebrated as Adele Loveless Day. She's also huge motivation for many women in the tech industry. So machine languages, which were the initial languages in the 19th century, they consisted of binary code like 0 and 1s, right? That's how computer understand the instructions even today, right? It's just that as a programmer you wouldn't do that. Now you have instruction, but there is a middle layer to that which translates the human code, the code that we write in Java, .NET, whatever language, and get these codes then get transformed to zeros and ones, and then the computers understand that. The problem with machine language is that since different computers use different instruction set, it was very difficult to manage, maintain, and understand or migrate. That was super difficult. I mean, machine language itself is very difficult to write and understand. Somebody has written it, is very difficult. But the problem is that it's not portable because some different machines use different languages. So that was a biggest pain point. And then came assembly language actually, which were better than the machine language. That was easier compared to machine language, but not as good as the high level language. It was still a low level programming language. So assembly languages were also low level computer programming languages that used mnemonics to represent machine language instructions. It's just that instructions were the same. It's just that the way you represent changed a bit. Right, so that improved, and that really made the programming a bit more fun. However, for normal people, it was still quite difficult actually, and it was still difficult to build good softwares using these languages. Here is this example of assembly language. You have to write. How many lines can you count? This is just a hello world program. Right? To write hello world, this is this much. You really have to write. Just imagine how difficult it was to write in assembly language. So the first software was written by Adele Loveless, as we said. This is a photo. I think she was also born to one of the finest writer in England of that time. I don't remember his name. Her father was a very famous person in England, and I think her mother was also a mathematician. So she wrote the first software ever, which was used to calculate the sequence of Bernoulli's number. And there were other contributors later on, Alan Turing, John von Neumann, Stanislav Ulam was also a great mathematician. All of these people actually worked with the atomic bomb, the Manhattan Project in the US. And they were very fond of computers, and they saw the potential of computers, and that's when they really contributed a lot during the 40s and 50s later on, and it gained popularity later on, and by 70s computers became more popular. So now the most popular programming languages right now in the world: Python, Java, JavaScript, C++. PHP, Ruby, and Kotlin. These languages are quite popular. Yeah. So in the world that we live in, which languages are the most popular in terms of the softwares that we use? Which languages are the most popular? I wanted to know this. You'll be surprised to know that assembly languages are still very, very popular. A lot of the code written in 60s, 70s, 80s, they were all written in assembly language, and many of them are still in use. Quite a surprise, right? Photon is still quite popular. Actually, many softwares we use, they were written in Photon. COBOL as well. The IBM mainframe. Many banks still use COBOL and IBM mainframe. C and Java became very popular in modern times in the 80s, 90s, after 2000 as well. .NET and Python became also very popular in the last 15, 20 years or so. And there are other languages like PHP and all. But these are some of the most important, most famous languages. You're surprised to know that assembly language is still the most used language ever in the history of computer programming. Thanks for watching. See you next time, guys.